Hi everybody, fantastic to connect with you and be part of your learning journey with the IGD. My name is Liz Villani. I'm the founder of a business called Courageous Success, and for the last 15 to 20 years I've been helping people to really be the best of themselves at work. This webinar is all about you, and it's all about maximising your reputation and uniqueness. I want us to really explore how you can bring more of your uniqueness into your personal brand. What is personal brand? Who do you want to be? How do you want to stand out? And how do you begin to really maximize your reputation? So we're going to look at exploring those things. We're also going to look at understanding the kind of things that we do to impress people. What are your strategies that you use to show that you're competent and clever and likable at work? And what's the impact of that on you and how you're feeling and how you're coming across as you as your personal brand? We're going to look at a few tools and approaches that will help you to really maximize yourself at work. And then finally, I want us to really have a solid exercise that you can take away and use in your working world to really maximize you and grow your career and reputation by being the best of yourself. As Robin has said, you have an editable work PDF. If you have that open now, I really suggest that you save it if you're using it on screen as part of your device. But if you haven't managed to download the worksheet, don't worry. As Robin has suggested, good old-fashioned pen and paper will work just as well. But I want us to really get practical in this webinar. So what is personal brand? It's a term that we use a lot within the workplace to really understand what it is that we're doing within our kind of reputation that can really kind of make us stand out. I had a quick look at Wikipedia and it's explored that kind of intentional image, that intentional effort. What do we want to be perceived as? But it's also about wanting us to have authority and appear credible and really kind of differentiate ourselves from other people and the competition. So in other words, it's about increasing our influence. It's about standing out as being a little bit unique. One of the things that we'd love you to do as part of the webinar is if you've got questions as you go through the session, what is personal brand? How do I find out these things? Then you can use the chat function, and Robin will look as we go through some of your questions and we'll look at some of the reactions that you're having. We're also going to do some polling so that we can kind of explore together what personal brand impact is and what might stop us from really maximizing that. So when you think about personal branding, think about what is the image that I want to portray of myself that makes me stand out as unique and credible, that will grow my career in my world. And I really encourage you at this point in the webinar to think stretch. All of us doubt ourselves. We're all making it up to a certain extent as we go along. We all worry with our self-confidence sometimes. We're going to explore some of that, but step into the energy of knowing when you're in your zone, you are massively capable. And let's explore that part of you to really build a solid reputation and personal brand. So let's go to the poll. Robin, if you wouldn't mind just starting the poll, I want to pose everybody a quick question. Simple yes or no answer. Do you feel that you have to prove your competence at work? Okay, do you feel that you have to prove your competence at work? If you would go on to the poll, just say yes or no, and in a second we'll have a look at your results. The recent webinar that we ran around for the IGD around imposter syndrome was fascinating on the poll there. 93% of people felt that they had times when they really did feel imposter syndrome. In other words, they didn't really feel like they were the right person in that job. And imagine that can really get in the way of you really being the best of you in your personal brand. Earlier this year, we conducted a survey around the world looking at being the best of yourself at work, and the results are fascinating. 50% of us expect people to prove themselves in some way before we are the truest version of ourselves. I just want us to think about that for a second, because if we want to portray a really positive personal brand, We need to portray us. We need to allow people to see us. We need to have the confidence to really be ourselves. But 50% of us, half of us, wait to check that it's safe, that it's okay to be real and to be ourselves. So I really want us to challenge that presumption in today's webinar. Looking at that point, 67% of people feel like they can't be themselves at work. If you're going to stand out as unique and be really you in your personal brand, the best person that you can be is yourself. And I want us to come from that perspective. So Robin, how did we get on with the poll?
So we have got 90% of people on the webinar, so that they do feel that they have to prove their competence at work, with 10% saying they do not.
Wow. Okay, that's so fascinating. So 90% of us feel on the call that we have to prove our competence. The reason that I've put this poll in here as a question to us all is, what happens when we feel we have to prove our competence? Who do we become? What do we show? And the challenge is that most of us will push or will change or will conform or will adapt. And when we do that, we really lose aspects of our confidence, but also our natural uniqueness and authenticity. We can blend and we can come across in a way that isn't necessarily kind of solid and real and authentic. And that has a huge impact on our personal brand and reputation. So let's just explore that. What I'd really like you to start to reflect on is, what do I want? Who am I? What do I know? But also, we're going to start by using our editable worksheets to really explore what it is that we do, first of all, to impress other people. In the survey earlier this year that we ran, 100% of people felt they had to prove their competence. For you as an audience, you're 90%, so you're almost there. This is something that can be a real challenge and get in the way of brilliant personal branding. So let's start our first exercise. So if you're using pen and paper, grab that now. If you're using your editable worksheet, have that on screen, and you can come back and forth between this webinar and your worksheet. If you've got it printed out, you can again just fill it in. If you are a reflective person and you feel like you want to have more time, the recording of today's webinar will be available on the hub, and you can also take time afterwards to reflect and build on the exercises. So don't worry if you feel like you're kind of lagging behind in this session. We all do things at our own pace. The important thing is that you reflect on these things as you move through your journey of creating your personal brand. So first exercise, I want us to look at what we do to impress. And we all kind of do this in different ways. We all want to succeed and be liked and look competent. And so there'll be certain things and certain behaviours that we have that really kind of are kind of impressing buttons. And I've used some examples here. What I'd like you to do is make a list of what you feel like you need to do to prove your competence when you're at work. And there's some examples on the screen. So for example, you might use lots of data and facts so that you bringing that element of intellect and edge. You might kind of use a bit of management speak. You might really prepare. You might rehearse even, or you might just copy other people's style. Maybe you self-deprecate. We're going to talk about that later. But essentially work hard. So make a list using your editable workbook of the things that you feel like you need to do to prove your competence. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to do that. I included good hair day in mine. Maybe it's not a good hair day on this webinar today, but you know what I mean. What is it that you do to impress? Perhaps there are parts of you that you withhold. So one of the examples on here is I put hold back the jokes, so you become more serious and more focused at those times. So hopefully you have a small list just to kind of be aware, and a lot of this is about, and when you think about personal branding and being the best of you, is about being really more self-aware of who you are and your reactions to things as you go about your work. What I want us to do then, now that we've reflected on what we think we need to do to be impressive, is just have a look at the reality of some of our natural feedback. So other people see us in a certain way, and most of us have had feedback either formally through our job roles or informally through our managers or people that work with us, or even our friends and family. In this second reflection, or using the editable worksheet, I really like you to list your positive feedback. What is it that people would say about you in a positive way? And I'm not necessarily talking about being great at spreadsheets or numbers and those kind of skill type aspects of your job. I really mean you as a person and how you think and how you behave. So perhaps people would describe you as friendly or kind of happy to challenge, or maybe a bit kind of competitive. Maybe your close friends and family would know you as being very kind and very funny. Maybe you've had the feedback that you have kind of a calm confidence when you're at work, or you're very organised and ordered, and that you're very open. So just take a second to reflect on positive feedback that you've had about you from friends and family, maybe some formal feedback at work, or informal feedback about what it's like to work with you as a person. And there's no room, you know, for that kind of humble approach in this work. You know, we are all great people when we're being the best of ourselves. So make sure you've got a good little list on there. The reason I've shared this kind of dichotomy, this challenge of these two questions, is to help you to be aware of your behaviours when you're under pressure and you feel like you need to impress, and then reflect on the difference between you when you're really being the best of you and when you're trying to impress, to look and gauge at how different they are from each other. So if you look at mine, for example, perhaps to impress, I would become, you know, a little bit sticking to what I know, you know, having a plan, being prepared, having that kind of data and fact available, things that maybe I've done in the past to impress. Whereas the feedback that I get generally as a person is that I'm very open and very friendly, and I'm sometimes a bit funny, although, as I shared with Robin earlier, I'm not very good at telling jokes and things like that. But I'm actually, you know, in my world, I'm known as being very commercial. I tend to know what sells, what works. I also tend to be quite clear in my communication and very focused, and I'll challenge things as well. So how different are those two columns for you? And I want you to really start to challenge yourself on, actually, if I was really being my positive feedback in those moments when I needed to impress, what might that look like for people around me? Because what we're doing then is starting to form our personal brand. So moving forward, what I would like to do then is help you, before we start to describe your personal brand for yourself, just like us to have a look at perhaps what stops us from really being the best of ourselves when we think about impressing people, when we think about, you know, to challenge ourselves to think, actually, well, what stops me being the best of me in those positive things that are going to make me stand out and use my strengths? And you'll see on your editable PDF, there are 10 questions on the same page. What I would like you to do is just answer each question and rate your agreement out of 10 with each answer. So you've already done one of those questions. Question 3, I don't need to prove my competence at work. So most of you will have a low score on there, okay? Because you do feel like you have to prove your competence at work. So just take a minute, just run down that list of 10 questions and give yourself a score out of 10 for how much these really are true for you in each statement. And then we'll explore. If you're using the editable worksheet, what will happen is that your total score will appear automatically at the bottom of the table. If you're using a printout or you're using pen and paper, then you can use your phone or a calculator if you'd like to, just to add up your scores out of 100. So I'm just going to give you another second just to complete your scoring. So I've used an illustration here of scoring that perhaps if I go back to my working world before I was helping you, if you like, in your industries, how would I have responded to it? And using my expertise of understanding people's challenges and levels of confidence and reactions, I've also brought some of that in too. And that resulted in a score, as you can see, of 41 out of 100. We're aiming for at least 80. Okay, aiming for at least 80. So how did you get on? I'd like, Robin, if you could pose the question, if you could pose the poll and just explain to the audience how the poll works on this question, we'll have a look. So in the poll, if you want to share the different levels of your scoring, we'll have a look at how you got on. And Robin, shout when you've got the poll results in and let's explore.
So the results are in now. They should be on the screen for everybody to view. So just as a quick run through, 0 to 24, 4%. Majority got 25 to 49 with 58%.
Great.
50 to 74, that was 34%. And we do actually have 3% of people who completed the survey fall into the 75 to 100 bracket.
Wow. If you are in that 75 to 100 bracket, well done. Yes. Fantastic. 3% of you. Wow. That is fantastic. You need to use your positive feedback to really now create a personal brand statement, which is where we're going to go next. I really love the fact as well that we've got a very small number in 0 to 24. Brilliant. What we're aiming for is 80. So if you're in those two categories in the middle, then I really encourage you to try and get underneath some of these scores and try to lift them. And let me just give you some examples. One of the things that you can look at is if you look at things like question 8. So question 8, I am the same person at work as at home. This is something that we can all practice. You've given yourself some clues on your positive feedback. There's no line drawn down you that says this is me at home and this is me at work. You're you everywhere. And actually, if you can bring more of you and your uniqueness everywhere, both inside and outside of work, you'll be really authentic and really you. So that's something that you can really practice. So the other thing that you can do, I'll give you another example. Question 4 is one that we see that generally is quite low for people. Others don't judge me for who I am at work. One of the things, unfortunately, we do tend to do is we tend to make things about us. So we tend to feel like people are questioning whether we are good enough or whether we look competent enough. Ask yourself this question: when generally other people are speaking and you're in their audience, what are you doing? Vast majority of us are just listening. We're just thinking, what does this mean? Or even thinking, this person's great. And yet actually, most of us think that other people are thinking the opposite of us. So a really good thing to practice is when you're with other people, remember that in your mind, what you're doing is you're just listening and gathering information. The vast majority of us do not judge each other just like that. And yet we think that we're being judged. All of these 10 questions, if you can work to build them, it'll really help you. And the webcast is actually that we recently recorded as well on confidence will really help you to lift some of those scores. So make sure that you listen to that if you're in that, if you're in the lower end and you really want to lift your scores. What I'd really like you to do is to capture some areas of focus for yourself. So at the bottom of the worksheet, it says my areas for focus. Just make a few notes for yourself. So for example, I've put, I need to have more faith in myself. My feedback is good. Most of us, vast majority of us, are always surprised how good our feedback is from other people. We're very quick to self-deprecate, but actually most of us do have good feedback. I need to play with less planning and less control in my world is another thing that I've put. And I need to believe in myself and rely on my confidence. So just take a minute before we go on and build the brand to help yourself just to have some actions and reflections. So let's capture those areas of focus and really start to look at what we want our brand to be. I posed the questions earlier. Who am I? What do I want? How do I want to be seen? Pull together an exercise for you to start to really explore this. And it's very simple. There are some questions that are listed on the left-hand side. And let's just work through them now. So the first question, what I'd like you to do is put the answers in the boxes underneath. And if you're using pen and paper, just create a word cloud. What is your positive reputation at work? What do you do well is the first question. So just take a minute just to pop in some examples. Maybe you're known for being very planned. Maybe you're known for being very efficient. Maybe you're known for being very trusting. Just pop those answers in the table underneath. What do you do well? What is your reputation at work positively? And again, try and not do the spreadsheets and the skills. Think about you as a person, because people are buying you. Second question on here is, what could you do better at work? In other words, what do you want to be known for? What do you aspire for people to say about you that they may not be saying already? Having a personal brand, when I pose this question, I'm not asking you to not be you, but most of us will put ourselves down rather than build ourselves up. And so I want you to really think about the reputation that you want to have. You can consciously amplify your reputation positively. So what would you love to be known for that perhaps people don't necessarily use as a description of you quite yet or enough? Just pop those answers into the word cloud underneath. Question 3, you can use the feedback that you used in the previous exercise if you'd like to. When you're with family and friends outside of work, what is your positive reputation there? Maybe you're known as being, the funny one, the one that always comes up with ideas, the one that's very helpful, that's very real. What is it positively that people outside of work, your friends and family, would say about you? And pop those in the word cloud. And like I say, you'll be able to download and watch the recording of this webinar if you'd like to have more time. This is something that you can build and craft if you need to outside of this hour. So question 4 is, what do you want to be known for? What are your unique qualities? I call these positive quirks. All of us tend to think we're not quirky. And if we think quirky, we think kind of creative and eclectic and those things. And not all of us are like that. But actually, you will have your quirks. What is it that people positively smile about when they think about you? And often that's outside of work. And pop a few words and phrases in the box, the table below. And then final question is, you know, that time when you're in your zone, when you're really shining, you're not being self-conscious, you're really just nailing it. What is it actually that describes you at that moment? You know, when you're shining as your best, what would others say about you in those moments? Maybe you're unstoppable. Maybe you have huge energy. Maybe you're very calm and reflective. In those moments when you're really focused and in your zone, what words would people use to describe you? Maybe you'd even, you know, put in there some words that describe how it feels to be you at those moments. So you should have a good selection of words and phrases. We want at least 10, really. If you have less than 10, you have less than 10. If you have lots, great. Okay. What I'd like you to do is select up to 10 words or phrases, positive ones. This is about positive reputation, and just pop them on the right hand side of the editable worksheet. So you have a list. So for example, you know, I've selected words like change and innovation and efficiency and being kind and being real. They're all words that I would use about me having gone through this exercise. Try and pick the ones that are kind of quite unique. Think quirk. So I'm going to give you a minute just to do that. Just select ideally 10, but it might be slightly less. Make them distinctive. Be brave. Step into that zone. Imagine what if when you pick those. It's about you being the best of you, stretching and creating your personal brand. So once you've selected your 10 words or phrases, and if you're using pen and paper, you may just have circled them, or you may, if you've got printed out, you've just written them down, or if you're using the editable PDF, you've just typed them in. What I'd like you to do is move to the next section. I want us to look at building a personal brand statement. Now, this is really powerful if you can get this right. What we're looking to create is a very simple, you don't want to write an essay, you want something that you can remember, something that if you wrote it down, it could fit on a post-it note, you know, and not with tiny writing, because what we need to do is really create a way of us being able to remember our uniqueness, remember the person we want to be to impress, rather than going to those behaviours perhaps and reactions that aren't necessarily always us and always positive and in line with who we are. So if you take your words and phrases, the distinct ones, have a go, top left it says my personal brand statement. Have a go at taking those words and phrases and literally putting them into one sentence, and try and start the sentence with I am. Okay, so I am, I use, I show, so that it's really about you. So I've given an example here on screen. I've just used the words and phrases, and sometimes it helps to step out of being you when you do this, because we can often do these things and think, oh my God, I sound really arrogant now. You're not being arrogant, you're just describing you at your best uniquely to create your brand, okay, your reputation. So if you need to, step out of yourself, just imagine someone else for a second. So example I've used here using my words, I am the go-getter, expressive, kind, real, funny, emotive character. I change things through innovation, all underpinned with a reputation of efficiency. Wow. So take your 10 words or phrases and right now, either pen or paper or using your editable PDF, just create a couple of very simple, try and sharpen your pencil, specific statement sentences that you can use to remember who to be when you're going about your world, to maximize your reputation and personal brand. If you need to take more time, you can do that and reflect. You don't have to get this nailed in one session. Robin, are there any questions or statements as we've been going through this first part of the webinar that are worth raising now, or should we keep going?
I think we can keep going through this, I think, and then we can bring them all together at the end.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to give you all a minute just to really have a go at crafting those simple statements. So powerful if you can get this succinct. Something that you can, you can play with it. You can kind of have it next to you as you go about your world and just craft it and play with it. And if you want to really have, an impact and really kind of, accelerate your journey of personal brand, challenge yourself. The next call you're on after this, the next meeting you're in, the next conversation that you have, the next email you write, bring that statement to life. Be brave, be courageous. Show people who you are and your uniqueness, and then you'll really stand out. And remember, this is all about the best of you being positive. One of the things that you can do to help you to do that is to grow your confidence. And I've already said you can listen to the webinar the webcast, that we recorded on confidence recently as well on the hub. But if you take the positive feedback that you've noted in the previous page and craft statements, confidence statements around those things, it'll really help you when you recite those to yourself. So, for example, I've been told that I do think commercially. So quite simply, I think commercially. I am kind and caring at work. I lead generally with a friendliness and an efficiency. So if you take the positive feedback that you've made notes of, then one of the things you can do is craft some confidence statements so that when you read your personal brand statement and think, right, okay, I'm going to really do this now, be me, and really amplify my uniqueness positively. When you go, ooh, maybe I can't do that, you can read a confidence statement, strong, focused, confident, and it'll help you to really live that personal brand. So just take a second just to write a few of those statements out for yourself. Once you've done that, just make a note of what you're going to do differently. And maybe even it's just saying, you know what, at 4 o'clock this afternoon, I have this meeting and I'm going to practice this. Or maybe you want more time to reflect, to actually create your brand statement and your confidence statement. So make a note of when you're going to do that. What do you want to do differently? What actions are you going to take now that you've reflected on how you react? Your personal feedback, what the drivers might be that are stopping you from really being the best of you in your brand, your brand statement, and your aspects of confidence using your positive feedback. Just take a second just to make a note on what action you can take to really live these. And then what I want to do is share some tools and advice to help you to really live and breathe you and your personal brand and your reputation. And then we'll go to a Q&A. So what will you do differently? What actions can you take? So let's have a reflection on what it is that stops us sometimes being the best of ourselves at work. Here's some data from the survey, the global survey to being yourself at work that I ran earlier this year. These are the average results. 83% of people said professionalism. We have this perception that if we're being us, then we're not being professional. I challenge you that if you were living and breathing that brand statement that you've created in balance, people would say that you're being professional. definitely. You're using your positive feedback. 67% of people say self-confidence can get in the way. So make sure that you really work on your confidence. Challenge yourself with those 10 statements that you've scored. And also, people say sometimes it's their manager or the company culture. I really encourage you to take action for you, irrelevant of the people around you. And the culture sometimes can be challenging that we all are all in at work. Really use your personal brand statement and confidence statements to be you. Challenge yourself on how you really boost your confidence. The vast majority of us, 83%, use recognition as our strategy to boost confidence. If you're constantly wanting to have that reassurance that you're going well, that's out of your control. You can't control that. That's essentially sometimes going to make your resilience lower. And that's going to get in the way of you being your personal brand and being you. The other interesting point I've put on here is that 100% of us say that we use autonomy and control as well to basically boost our confidence at work. If you over control, then you're really going to move into more of a transactional persona, and people buy people and they buy you. So if you can really kind of challenge yourself not to control everything and not to really need autonomy, but relax and be the best of you, it'll really help to build your brand and reputation at work. So let's look at some tips, top tips to maximize that reputation and uniqueness as you. The first point is here, I've shared here on the Be Yourself at Work approach is I don't compare myself to others. I only compare to me. You're you. Everyone else has their own uniqueness. So rather than looking around you, look within you and how you're doing. Be yourself, as I've said. You are already unique by being you. And it's much easier to be you in your natural reputation positively than to kind of act. It's exhausting to act. So use who you are to stand out uniquely. Be curious about what you can learn from other people and situations, and don't always think about needing to be right. Most of us feel like we always have to have all the answers, but you don't need to know everything. And one of the best tricks I've seen on really maximizing reputation at work is to genuinely be interested in others. That question about feeling like you're being judged, if you can actually be interested in others actively and want to learn genuinely from other people, you'll make them feel special, and that's what they'll remember you for. Be the real you and see the real person in others, so not just their reactions and behaviours. People are all good when they're being the best of themselves, but work can get in the way, reactions can get in the way, culture can get in the way. Check that you're not expecting others to be a certain way. Be open-minded, and don't make things about you. See the real people in people, and that will really stand out for other people. You'll become very engaging, even more engaging than you are now. I am different to others and I like my uniqueness. We are all unique. Use those quirks positively, and please do try not to self-deprecate. It's something that a lot of us do with nerves. It's kind of, say I'm great, but then put ourselves down in the same statement. If you really want to maximize your reputation, grow your career, and have a great personal brand, you need to ban self-deprecation. It's not helping. And then finally, rely on yourself. Don't just rely on knowledge and data to do your job. Trust yourself too. Use you as well as your knowledge. Trust yourself that you'll get things right. Practice and play. Use your confidence statements. So I'm going to pass back to Robin, and we're going to do a Q&A. So if you've got questions that you'd like to ask around some of the exercises or how to really maximize your reputation or personal brand at work, then just use the function on screen and we'll get through some of your questions. So Robin, I'm going to pass back to you.
Thanks, Liz. And thank you for that session. It was another great interactive workshop that you've provided for us, so really appreciate that. And we do have some questions that are coming through, but as Liz said, please keep them coming in and we'll get through as many as possible in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So let's start off with this one. So this was in relation to the challenging yourself towards the beginning. And at work, you need to fit into a business culture, whilst at home you can be yourself. So how can you be the same at home and at work?
It's a really, really good question. And what I'd really encourage you to do is to think about work culture as a collection of people, because that's what it is. That culture you are absolutely part of and you really do interact with. And that kind of, I'm going to be a certain way at home and then a certain kind of face or mask at work, often can contribute to a culture that really you feel like you can't be you in, and yet you're contributing to it by changing and conforming to it. If you think about the culture where you work, when you're interacting one-on-one or small groups, you'll probably be more you, more like the you outside of work. When you're with bigger groups, sometimes what can happen is that we start to kind of entrench and we will kind of have that mask and persona. At that moment, are you contributing to a culture that you don't hugely appreciate fully? So my challenge is, absolutely, our evidence shows that you can be the best of yourself at work by being the same person at work as at home. But remember, I use the word best. Okay, so absolutely, you can be yourself in any culture, but it's the best of you. I hope that helps.
Here's another question. What tools do you recommend to reduce the need for recognition from others to boost your confidence?
Yes, so this is we really looked at this in the webcast. So we do rely on recognition a lot. It's one of our #1 strategies to have personal confidence. It's completely out of our control, and so our resilience can really go up and down. Our well-being can go up and down. We call that kind of approach an external confidence strategy. I would say, what you need to do is really build belief in yourself. So rather than relying or checking that people are listening to you, or asking for feedback or whether that's done a good job, ask yourself, well, what really went well there? Build. You've hopefully crafted a few confidence statements as part of this webinar. Use those statements to really build an internal confidence strategy rather than relying on externals, to tell yourself that you are good at what you do, that you are good as a person, and to really reflect on those things. My other top tip, and I could talk forever, as Robin knows, about confidence, is really, really, really build a strong relationship with yourself. If you can really work on almost kind of like talking to yourself, but positively on the inside, if you can really get to know you, and get to know you, I mean, in a positive way, like you would if you were with your best friends and family and work colleagues that you love working with. If they're wobbling, you build them up. Whereas when it comes back on us, we tend to kind of put ourselves down. So rather than having an external confidence strategy, bring it back within you. Internal confidence strategy, rely on yourself, use confidence statements, build your reputation, your relationship with yourself, so you're talking to you, and grow your inner resilience without needing all of that recognition.
Got some good questions coming through here. What do you advise if you're just having one of those days? What can be a quick tip to boost confidence, for example, before a big presentation or a challenging conversation?
Really, really, really good question. Yes, I think there's a couple. For me, there's a couple of questions in there. The first one is, what do I do if I'm having a bad day? And I think, my answer to that is choose to have a good one. It really is as simple as that. Unfortunately, most of us, those mornings when you wake up, and you fall over the bedpost, and then you go to get what you wanted to wear out, and it's got a great big stain on it, or your hairdryer blows up, or whatever. We tend to kind of like compound those feelings, but actually we could choose in any of those moments just to let it go. So choice, and I know it's hard, but actually, go, you know what, actually I have fallen over and stubbed my toe, and I haven't got X, Y, and Z done, and I haven't got to kind of have the plan I thought of today, but I'm going to choose for it not to matter. And it really is psychologically as simple as that. Your brain is wired just to be able to make that choice. Only you make it more complicated. So that would be my first answer to your first question, part of the question. The second one, what do I need to do to boost my confidence when I really need to build myself up? Use everything we've done in this webinar. So know that in those moments, the danger is that you'll step into some of that strategy behavior to impress. So be aware of it. Look at it before, look at your list before you go in. And then look at your positive brand statements, and have the courage to not be self-conscious, work on those scores, on challenging yourself, and really live and breathe. It might feel like you're acting when you do that. I promise you, if that personal brand statement is reflective of you, which is what we've done in these exercises, you actually won't be acting. You'll just be being you. So practice it. Choice and practice. And being really conscious is the way to help boost you in those moments.
Great. We've got about 5 minutes left of questions. I hope we can get through a couple more. Here's one for you, Liz. How do you change people's view on yourself where they are a blocker to your development and contradicts the view that others have?
Interesting question. Would you mind saying that again, just so I'm really clear?
Yeah, of course. How do you change people's view on yourself where they are a blocker to your development and contradicts the view that others have?
It's really interesting. Yes. A lot of us have been here, haven't we? I guess my answer is, my advice is quite challenging. The way they react will often create a reaction in us. So, if you work for somebody that you believe isn't necessarily respectful of you, or isn't seeing the best in you where others are, what can happen is that you can change and adapt your behavior, so your reactions to them. So, for example, you might become a little bit colder with them, or you might avoid them. Or you might use some of those strategies that you've identified in this webinar, use a bit more data, those kinds of things. But it's highly unlikely that you won't be being the best of you when you're with them because of your reaction to them. So my challenge, first of all, would be, no matter who they are, no matter what they think, no matter what they say, stay you. So be the same person, even more of the best of you, with people that challenge you, versus everybody else. So amplify your goodness. Don't let their energy infiltrate you. You can choose how you react, so choose it. And I think the other thing that you can kind of reflect on is that people will see you through their own eyes, their own insecurities, their own agendas. And often we can amplify the challenge of that. So, reflect on the fact, actually, are they seeing you in that negative light versus everyone else? Keep pressing the positive button, and then really kind of maximize your network. So if you want to develop at work and you feel like you're being held back because of someone's opinion of you, the only thing someone once told me, the very best person you can be is yourself. So amplify yourself with that person, the good bits, and then really, maximize your network, because it'll be more than one person that gets you promoted in your career. It will often be multiple people. It's about your brand and reputation that'll get you there. I hope that helps.
Great, and let's have one final question. What if senior management are putting their view, a way of working, as the only way forward and are not open to listening to other ideas, which feels is starting to reflect in the business culture?
Very interesting question. Very interesting. I guess my initial reaction to that, using my experience of thousands of workplaces around the world, is that they're probably not listening enough because they don't have time. So, I know that might not be the answer that we're all looking for, but people that are at a senior level, they won't necessarily appear to be listening because they haven't necessarily got the time to. So, there are things that you can do to kind of feed information and feed feedback back. And, culture isn't something that's outside of you, it's something that you contribute to. I've seen examples where people at all kinds of levels have influenced whole floors of people. I know at the moment a lot of us are working from home, but by really being quirky, authentic, being yourself, don't underestimate the impact that you'll have on other people, including those senior people. So if you want to get people to stand up and listen, then find a way that will help them. Find the time to do it. Be really you, amplify your natural reputation, and remember that you are that culture too. You know, and the vast majority of people at a senior level, if they knew that their culture and what it felt like wasn't the best, they'd want to know about it. It's just they probably haven't got time. So find ways to feed it back.
Well, I hope that answers that question there. We have a couple of minutes before I wrap up on this great session. But Liz, do you have any final words you want to share with our audience?
So I think, you know, what I encourage everyone to do, all of the evidence that I have reviewed and researched over the couple of decades that I've been working with people and seeing what makes them successful, the number one thing is to really be the best of yourself when you're at work. And that means you are the same person at work as at home. The people that you maybe don't connect really well with, or that you're challenged by, be more of you, the positive you. Don't give your power away, and really be conscious of who you are. So, you know, we've done work in today's session around your statements, you know, your brand statement. Use it. Don't just let this be, you know, an hour that you spent on a Wednesday in October, you know, in 2020 that you forget about. Really kind of use that statement and actively develop and learn and grow yourself, because when I see people that do that, wow, they really accelerate their career. They really do that by standing out, and also they inspire others to do the same, and that affects culture. That will affect the culture in our workplaces too. So that's what I would love to kind of share, Robin.